The morning sun spread across the quiet suburb like melted gold, glinting off parked cars and the dew clinging to freshly cut lawns. Jacob Meyer stepped outside, coffee in hand, the steam curling into the cool air. It was the kind of calm that promised a good day, or so he thought. He pressed his garage remote, expecting to see the neat concrete floor, his tools stacked in perfect order, and his empty parking spot waiting. Instead, a red SUV filled the entire space. Jacob froze. His coffee mug tilted until hot liquid spilled across his fingers. He blinked, hoping the image would disappear. It didn't. The SUV sat there proudly, sunlight gleaming off its spotless paint. He walked closer, squinting at the license plate, unfamiliar. Then he noticed the tag hanging from the rearview mirror, an HOA parking permit. A slow burn crept up his neck. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. He circled the SUV like a detective examining a crime scene. It wasn't damaged or forced in. It had been parked neatly, intentionally. Someone had opened his garage and driven right in. And Jacob already knew who. He crossed the lawn to the house next door, his jaw tight with every step. The garden was immaculate, rows of petunias standing like soldiers. The flag by the mailbox fluttered sharply in the breeze. He rang the doorbell. After a full minute, Lena appeared, mid-40s. Blonde hair pulled so tight it looked painful. Lips painted the same red as her SUV. Her smile was sweet, but sharp around the edges. "Morning, Jacob. Everything all right?" "Your car's in my garage," he said evenly. "Oh, that." She waved a manicured hand as if he'd mentioned a misplaced newspaper. Jack needed to move it for a bit. HOA rules. No street parking overnight. "That's not your driveway," Jacob replied. Her eyes flicked toward his house, then back to him. "Well, technically it's community property. We agreed to be flexible, remember?" He blinked. "No, Lena, it's my property." "My garage." "Don't be so dramatic," she said, her smile thinning. "It's just for today. My son needed space to wash his car, and I didn't want to violate HOA guidelines. I thought you'd understand." "Understand?" He laughed once, short, sharp, not amused. "You broke into my garage." "Oh, Jacob." She sighed like a teacher correcting a student. "Let's not use words like broke in. You leave your keypad uncovered. Anyone could assume it's shared access. This keeps things orderly." Footsteps approached from behind her. A lazy voice followed. "Yo, Mom, we done here?" Jack appeared. Tall, smug, maybe 20 at most, wearing a grin that screamed entitlement. He looked Jacob up and down. "Nice garage, man." "Way bigger than ours." Jacob stared him down. "Move the car, now." Jack shrugged. "Mom said it's fine." "Chill out," Lena's eyes flashed. "Jacob, please don't take that tone with my son. He's just following instructions. You know how young men can be." Jacob's pulse pounded in his temples. "I don't care, move the car." Her voice dropped lower, colder. "You're being unreasonable. We all have to share space here. As HOA vice president, I have certain privileges. I'd appreciate it if you respected that." He clenched his fists, his voice calm but firm. "Privileges don't include trespassing." Lena's lips curled into something between a smirk and a warning. "You might want to be careful with those accusations. I could file a complaint for harassment." Then she shut the door. Jacob stood there for a long moment, staring at the smooth white paint of her door. A bird chirped nearby, too cheerful for the fire burning in his chest. He walked back to his garage. The SUV still gleamed under the morning sun, its hood reflecting the sky like nothing was wrong. He pressed the remote again, watching the door lower slowly, like a curtain closing at the end of a bad play. Inside his house, his phone buzzed. A message from his wife, Amy. "Hey, hun, how's the morning? Did you talk to Lena about the HOA meeting?" Amy's message blinked on his phone. Jacob typed back, "Yeah, she parked in our garage." A moment later came the reply. "What? Are you serious? Just call the HOA." He did. The woman who answered sounded rehearsed, polite and far too familiar with Lena's name. "Oh yes," she said casually. "Mrs. Harrington mentioned she might use your garage temporarily. Something about driveway maintenance." Jacob's grip tightened around the phone. "She doesn't have permission." "Well," the woman sighed, "she's the HOA vice president. It's not unusual for her to make temporary adjustments. I'm sure it'll be cleared up soon." "Temporary adjustments," he repeated slowly. "To my house? Please don't raise your voice, sir. We encourage neighborly communication." The call ended before he could say another word. He set the phone down carefully as if it might shatter. His pulse thudded in his ears. Through the blinds, he saw Jack laughing with a friend, tossing a football across their driveway like nothing was wrong. Lena stood nearby, clipboard in hand, chatting with another neighbor. Everyone smiled at her, respectful and deferential. She was the queen of the cul-de-sac. Jacob stared until his own reflection blurred in the glass. He'd moved here for peace, not politics. He'd paid too much for the house for the dream of quiet. And now this woman thought she could waltz into his property and rewrite the rules. The sun climbed higher, flooding the street with white heat. The SUV sat motionless in his garage, a red monument to arrogance. He considered calling the police but stopped himself. Lena would twist the story like she always did. HOA disputes aren't crimes, she'd say. He's just being difficult. It would only make him look petty. Instead, he walked outside, trying to appear calm. Leaning against his mailbox, he pretended to scroll his phone. Lena's laugh carried across the street, sharp, confident, and practiced. When her eyes met his, she smiled sweetly as if nothing was wrong. Then she turned away, dismissing him without a word. That smile was worse than an insult. It said, "I'm untouchable." Jacob stood there until his coffee went cold. The SUV's reflection shimmered faintly in the garage window. Somewhere inside him, irritation hardened into something colder, calm, focused, deliberate. By sunset, he had replayed every word, every smirk, every shrug. The tone in her voice, her son's arrogance, all of it looped through his mind. He didn't shout. He didn't slam doors. He just sat on the porch as the air cooled and the cicadas began to hum. The garage door stayed closed. The red SUV waited inside, patient and smug. He whispered to himself almost absently, "If they want to play games, fine. Let's play." As the last light faded, his reflection in the window smiled back, tired, sharp, and completely done being polite. The next morning, an engine's growl pulled him from sleep. Jacob hurried to the window, hoping it had all been a bad dream. But there it was, the red SUV still in his garage, idling proudly like it owned the place. Lena stood beside it, coffee cup in hand, robe tied neatly, watching the sunrise as if it were her own porch view. Her son Jack leaned against the hood, scrolling through his phone. They looked perfectly at home. Jacob stepped outside barefoot, wearing only a t-shirt and flannel pants. "You said it was just for a day," he called out. Lena turned, that same infuriating smile on her face. "Good morning to you, too. It's still temporary." "Temporary?" he repeated, walking closer. "It's been more than 24 hours, she raised a brow. "Well, my driveway's being power washed today. We can't have vehicles there until the sealant dries. Proper maintenance, Jacob." "It's trespassing," he said flatly. "Semantics," she replied lightly, taking a sip of her coffee. "I already informed the HOA. Everything was documented." Jacob wanted to shout, but Lena gave him that warning look, the kind people in authority use when they know they're protected. Jack smirked from the driver's seat and revved the engine just enough to make. Jacob stepped back, Lena's tone softened. "I understand this is frustrating, but let's be adults. No need to escalate something so minor." Then she turned and walked away, her robe fluttering behind her like a flag of victory. By noon, Jacob drafted a short note and taped it to the SUV's window. "Remove this vehicle immediately. You are parked on private property." He pressed the black marker so hard it nearly tore the paper. When he returned later that evening, the note was gone. In its place, a new sticky note read, "Patience, neighbor." L. Jacob's jaw tightened until it ached. Over the next few days, the red SUV became a fixture in his garage. Sometimes it was there in the morning, sometimes gone for a few hours, but always back before nightfall. Jack had started leaving things behind. Sunglasses, a fast food cup, even a beach towel slung over Jacob's tool rack. Each trace felt like a signature of mockery. Jacob tried to stay calm. He emailed the HOA with photos, filing a formal complaint. No response. He called twice, only to hear the same line. "We're reviewing your submission." 2 days later, a notice appeared in his mailbox. Resident conduct warning. Disrespectful communication toward HOA board member. He read it 3 times, then flipped it over in disbelief. Lena had twisted the story against him. That night, Amy called. Her voice trembled slightly over the phone. "Jacob, maybe just let it go. I don't want you getting fined again." She's parked in my garage, Amy. That's not something you let go. I know, she sighed. But people like her, they're connected. You don't win by fighting. He hung up quietly, her words echoing in his mind. You don't win by fighting. But he wasn't so sure anymore. The next morning, he decided to try one last time, civilly, face to face. He knocked on Lena's door. This time she opened it mid-conversation, clipboard in hand and phone pressed to her ear. Oh, Jacob, she said into the receiver. Hold on a sec. My neighbor's here. Again. Then lowering the phone, she added, Something I can help you with? Move the SUV, please. Her voice was calm but clipped. You're becoming hostile, Jacob. It's very concerning. Hostile? He repeated, baffled. Yes. She jotted something on her clipboard. You've come to my house twice unannounced. It's starting to feel like harassment. I may need to report it. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You parked in my garage and I'm the one harassing you? She didn't answer. Just gave him that tight, practiced smile and closed the door. The sound of the latch sliding into place felt final. That evening, Jacob came home late. The garage door groaned halfway open, then jammed. He stepped out of his car, squinting through the dim light. The SUV was still there, parked slightly crooked, blocking his way in. He dropped his briefcase, standing in the driveway as exhaustion and anger tangled inside him. This wasn't arrogance anymore. It was control, a game of dominance. Lena wanted power, and she'd found the perfect stage for it. The HOA, the rules, the illusion of civility. Jacob took out his phone and began recording, narrating quietly. This is day 5, same vehicle, no authorization, multiple complaints filed, no action taken. He panned the camera slowly, capturing everything before uploading the video privately, not for attention, but for evidence. 2 more days passed. The SUV remained. The air in the garage grew thick with the smell of gasoline and the sour stench of old food from Jack's trash. Jacob couldn't stand stepping inside anymore. He started parking on the street, seething each night as he looked at the closed door hiding their car. On the 7th day, he woke to a new notice taped to his front door. Reminder: street parking is prohibited overnight. Violations will result in fines. He stared at it, then laughed. It was a dry, disbelieving laugh that echoed through the quiet morning. Lena's SUV had taken his garage, and now the HOA, her HOA, was punishing him for parking outside. It was brilliant in a twisted way. By the weekend, the whispers started. Neighbors glanced his way, murmuring as he passed. Lena stood in her yard, chatting easily, her voice carrying words like uncooperative and poor attitude. That night, Jacob couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, the weight of suburban quiet pressing on his chest. Across the street, Lena's house glowed softly behind her curtains. A tall shadow, Jack's, moved past the window. Then Lena appeared, handing him something. Laughter followed, muffled but cruel. Jacob stared until his eyes burned. The next morning, he decided on one last attempt at reason. When Jack came outside to wash the SUV, music blasting, Jacob approached. Jack, he said evenly, move the car. Last warning. Jack didn't even bother looking at him. Mom says it's fine, he said casually. Your mom's wrong, Jacob replied. Jack smirked, flicking water onto Jacob's shoes. Guess you should have joined the board, man. Maybe then you'd get a say. Jacob's pulse thundered in his ears. He turned away before his frustration got the better of him. That night he sat alone in the dark, blinds half open, watching as the SUV's headlights swept into his garage again. The soft clunk of the door closing echoed through the house like a challenge. He opened his laptop, fingers tense on the keyboard, searching things he'd never thought to Google before. Property rights versus HOA authority. Trespassing by a neighbor with HOA approval. Nonviolent ways to handle entitled neighbors. One link caught his eye. A forum thread titled Creative Justice for HOA Bullies. He clicked. The posts were a strange mix of humor and frustration, stories of people finding clever ways to reclaim their peace. Someone had filled a neighbor's pool with biodegradable paint. Another had planted onions along their fence line until the smell forced their neighbor indoors. Then one short comment stood out, written like a warning. When people treat your property like their own, remind them what comes with it. He read it twice. Slowly, an idea began to form, not out of anger, but out of calm certainty. That night, sleep never came. But when the first light of morning touched the blinds, Jacob felt ready. He looked outside at the red SUV sitting smugly behind his garage door and smiled, quietly, coldly. He finally knew what to do. The sky was gray and heavy as Jacob drove through winding back roads outside town. Fields stretched endlessly, dotted with barns and slow-moving cattle. Eventually, he turned down a dirt road that led to a small dairy farm he'd visited once before for work. The farmer, a weathered man named Tom, was hosing down a tractor when Jacob pulled up. "Morning, Jacob," Tom called. "What brings you out here?" Jacob hesitated just long enough to sound casual. "Got a bit of a situation back home. You still cleaning out those holding pits?" Tom chuckled. "You mean the sludge tanks?" "Always. Why? Any chance you'd part with a barrel or two?" Tom gave him a puzzled look. "That's an odd request." Jacob smiled faintly. "Let's just say I'm dealing with a persistent pest." Tom shrugged. "As long as you're not doing anything stupid, sure. I'll fill one up." An hour later, Jacob was driving back toward the suburbs, a sealed metal drum of thick brown sludge strapped to the bed of his truck. The faint, earthy smell leaked through the steel, a scent that felt like a warning. The closer he got to home, the more unreal his neighborhood looked. Perfect lawns, bright flowers, neat fences, a world that pretended problems didn't exist. As the sun began to sink, Jacob parked in his driveway. The red SUV gleamed from inside his garage, its paint glowing like a trophy. He checked his security cameras, all angles recording, then backed his truck into place. The hose snaked from the barrel to a nozzle, heavy and slow. For a moment he stood there, watching his reflection in the SUV's windshield. Then, without hesitation, he turned the valve. The sound came first, a wet, steady gurgle, followed by a heavy splash. Thick brown sludge poured across the SUV's hood, spreading in dark, dripping waves. It slid down the sides, across the roof, and over the windshield until every inch of red disappeared beneath a dull, earthy coat. The smell was sharp, raw, unmistakable, and strangely satisfying. He worked carefully, almost peacefully, coating every panel until the once polished SUV looked like something dragged out of a swamp. When it was done, he stepped back, breathing evenly. He pulled out his phone, took a few photos, and opened the HOA group chat. He typed a short message. "Found an unauthorized vehicle on my property. Handled it." Then he hit send. The response came fast. Jacob's phone lit up with notifications, question marks, shocked emojis, messages flooding in. Then her name appeared in bold, Lena Harrington. "What did you do?" Jacob switched his phone to silent. It took less than 10 minutes for her to arrive. The sharp click of her heels on the driveway cut through the evening air like a metronome of fury. The garage door stood open when she reached it. The smell hit first, heavy, sour, overwhelming. Then she saw it. Her scream split the quiet. Jack ran up behind her, stopping short. "Oh my God," he muttered. "It's everywhere." Lena spun toward Jacob, face red with disbelief. "You maniac, you destroyed my car." Jacob stood calmly on his porch, hands in his pockets. "Your car was trespassing," he said evenly. "I treated my property. Nothing illegal about that." "That's biohazardous waste," she shouted. Jacob's tone didn't waver. "Already paid for it, and every day you parked there." She stormed closer, finger stabbing the air. "I'm calling the police." "Good," Jacob replied, pointing to the security camera above the garage. "Make sure they check the footage." Her mouth opened, then shut. Jack gagged as he stepped too close to the mess, coughing from the stench that clung to everything. Neighbors began to appear, blinds shifting, doors cracking open. Someone lifted a phone, recording. When the police arrived, Jacob stayed composed while Lena launched into a furious explanation. He vandalized my property. He poured whatever that is on my car." The officer looked from her to Jacob, then at the SUV dripping sludge onto the driveway. "Sir," he asked, "is this your garage?" Jacob nodded. "Yes, officer. The vehicle isn't mine. I've filed multiple complaints about unauthorized parking, all documented. I simply applied an organic compost treatment this morning. Didn't realize someone left a car inside." Lena sputtered. "He's lying. That's malicious intent." The officer frowned slightly. "Ma'am, you admit you parked here?" "It was temporary," she said. "That's still trespassing," the officer replied calmly. "Civil matter, not criminal. You can take it up with the HOA." She looked ready to explode, but the officer was already walking back to his patrol car. The small crowd that had gathered whispered among themselves, phones still raised. By the next morning, the video was online. Someone had uploaded it with the caption, "HOA Vice President gets a taste of karma." It spread faster than Jacob ever expected. Hundreds of comments, some shocked, most amused. When he stepped outside that morning, a few neighbors smiled or nodded. They didn't say much, but the message was clear. They knew. At the next HOA meeting, Lena tried to reclaim her composure. She wore a stiff blazer and forced a smile, pretending nothing had happened. But the mood in the room had shifted, colder now, sharper. Jacob sat quietly in the back, waiting. When the agenda reached neighborhood disputes, he stood and handed out printed copies. Emails, photos, timestamps from his cameras, even the violation notices he'd received. He spoke evenly, his voice calm, but resolute. "I followed every rule, every regulation. The only person who didn't is standing right there." Lena's composure cracked. "You set me up. You humiliated me." Jacob's expression didn't change. "No," he said. "You did that yourself." The room fell silent. Then the HOA president, a gray-haired woman who rarely spoke, cleared her throat. "Effective immediately, Lena Harrington is removed from her position as vice president. All in favor?" Every hand went up. Lena's face went pale. She gathered her papers with shaking hands and left the room, heels clicking fast against the tile. Jack trailed behind, eyes fixed on the floor. Weeks passed. The red SUV disappeared, sold off quietly. The stains on Jacob's driveway faded with each rainfall, but the memory stayed. The neighborhood grew quieter. People waved more often. Even the HOA emails became polite, stripped of their old arrogance. One morning, Jacob stood in his driveway, coffee in hand. The sun reflected off clean concrete, and the air smelled of fresh grass, not sludge. He exhaled slowly, a faint smile forming. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been crafted, measured, and earned. Across the street, a moving truck backed into Lena's driveway. She stood beside it, sunglasses on, pretending not to notice him. But when their eyes met, she looked away first. Jacob raised his mug in a silent toast. Then he turned toward his house. Inside, his security monitor blinked quietly, recording nothing but peace. The garage door stood open, empty, waiting, and finally his again.